I ask if they have my husband, and they say yes. I say, on what charge? They say attempted human trafficking. And it's $250,000 to bail him out.
I'd like to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today, I have Amanda Quick with me, who is not only just an author, she's a speaker, and she is an advocate for change. And I'm going to be talking to her a little bit about her experience in life. So, first of all, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so this one was interesting. When I was looking over some of your information, I was, I thought, I could dig in deep, but I feel like I want to kind of get it from your experience. I want you to kind of let me know your experience and let the listeners kind of hear about what you are all about and what you're doing in your life. So I do kind of go down a rabbit hole of different questions. And one of the first questions I usually ask everybody is if you could paint a picture and give me a little bit of information about yourself, what your life was like before the change, before the experience that probably led up to the changes you've made in your life. What was your life like?
So I'm going to use the word normal, which is not true to my world today, but I was a full-time stay-at-home mom. I had 3 young kids. My husband worked and, we had a house, we had a dog, checked all of the boxes. I had friends. We would sometimes go out to dinner on Friday night. The only complaints is like you work too much and, money things. And it's just normal American life. That was my life. And I thought back then it was good. It was normal. It was easy. I got to stay home with my kids. I was really grateful to have that. Most people in America don't have that. They don't have that privilege. And so I had a lot of gratitude for being able to do that. I did breastfeeding support. I helped other new moms. I was involved in those ways.
Okay. Okay. So you had the what you would call it just a standard lifestyle. You were married with children, basically, and living a life,
Yes,
and things were just going as planned as
pretty
you
normally.
pretty
Yeah,
normally. Okay.
exactly. Pretty normally as far as, the kids were little, so that was the focus.
Hmm.
Um, I had kids young, but then I got to stay home and that became my world.
And the world that the environment and world around you at the time, was it similar to what you experienced growing up yourself, or was this a little bit
No,
different?
no, this was different. Growing up, my parents did not stay together, and they were never even when they were technically together, they were never together, and
Okay.
they lived in different parts of the house. They didn't really speak to each other, and eventually it escalated to some domestic violence, and my dad ended up moving out. And I was raised for the rest of my childhood by my mom as a single mom who also worked full time. And I was fairly independent and kind of on my own at that point in a lot of ways. And so it was a very different environment. In fact, my vision for my life as a child did not include getting married and having 3 kids and doing any of those things because I had no model for that.
Right. How old were you when you found yourself with 3 children and married?
My first child I had at 22, and then I had 3 by the time I was 27.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So by
So
27, you
younger
had
than
three
most
kids.
people do that, but
Oh, absolutely. Especially nowadays, right? A lot of people don't
yes.
even start till 40, some of them, because they're like going
And
through life and careers, right?
and full transparency, there was no on purpose having 3 kids that early, but once you started and you just keep going.
You just keep going, right? Perfect. Okay, so you're living this life, everything's going as planned. You're working full time at this point.
No, I'm I'm staying home full time. So I'm
Okay,
housewife. 3 kids, you know, uh preschool and play dates, and that's my life.
right. Okay. Okay. And okay. So how did the experience that really shifted your life happen, and what led up to it?
So normal day. And this my husband just doesn't come home from work one day. he intended to go see his mom and pick up some things at her house. And so I expected him late, which he was a workaholic. He always worked late. He often didn't even answer his phone half the time. It was one of the things we thought about. But he never didn't come home. It would just usually be bedtime for the kids and stuff like that. And so when he said, hey, is there food? I thought he was on his way. This was like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And then a couple of hours go by and he's still not home. I called his mom and he had left a couple of hours ago. Eventually I went to bed because I didn't know what to do. And I had a nursing child. My youngest was 1. So the kids are 1, 4, and 5. And I wake up 2 o'clock in the morning. He's still not there. I call the hospitals. They don't have him. I wake up again at 5 o'clock in the morning. He's still not there. And now I'm like, what am I going to do? I got 3 sleeping children in the house. I can't even go look for him. And I got the idea to call non-emergency dispatch. He's not been missing for 24 hours, but maybe they can help me or they can tell me what the next steps are. And I call non-emergency dispatch and they answer and I say, my husband didn't come home. This is not like him. And they said, well, we can help, but we're going to transfer you to the jail, see if he's there and call us back if he's not. And I was like, okay, I'll call you right back. They transfer me, the jail picks up. I ask if they have my husband and they say yes. I say, on what charge? They say attempted human trafficking. And it's $250,000 to bail him out.
Wow.
Yeah. And I about dropped the phone. What? I don't even know what that means. Like my mind goes to this movie scene scenario and we live in a little Colorado town. Like what? And I don't think any of it could possibly be real. I start having all of these other, like, is his wallet stolen and he's dead in a ditch? Because those were the scenes playing in my mind all night when he didn't come home, is that something has happened to him. But I'm, again, have 3 young kids asleep in the house. There's not much I can do. And so I'm obviously wide awake. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. I start calling lawyers and bail bondsmen and trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. Because in my mind, there's no flipping way that any of this makes any sense. So I have to help. I have to figure it out. I have to do something. And eventually I get a hold of bail bondsmen who were more than happy to tell you about how to bail them out, just, for 10% of the bond that they keep. And then a lawyer calls me back at about 7 o'clock in the morning and says he'll come talk to me if I show up at his office at, I think, 11 a.m. or something like that. And, that morning I get the kids off to school and I try to go to the jail to see if I can see him. You're not allowed to visit people at jail without an appointment. I didn't know that. And
What,
just
before you continue, before this continues, like, were you at any point thinking they've got the wrong person?
Yeah,
like,
I think that
way.
like, do they even have him? Does somebody have his wallet and is identifying as him or something like that? Like that's what's in my mind. So the bail bondsman actually agreed to go to the jail because they could get in because I couldn't get in and talk to him. And I ran into the bail bondsman and I show him my phone with a picture of my husband and say, is this who you saw? Because I don't even believe it. And he says, yes. And I'm like, well, I guess I know he's not dead. Like,
my goodness. Okay.
That's where my mind is at. I go to the lawyer, and when I'm in the lawyer's office at 11 a.m. that morning is when he finally calls me. And I pick up and, you got to accept charges for the call. And he says, I'm in jail. I said, I know where you are. I'm in a lawyer's office. Don't say anything because, something is wrong. I have to help. That's where my mind is at. I still don't believe any of this could possibly be connected to anything legitimate. And I pay the lawyer a, retainer fee to talk to him. And the lawyer talks to him. We have to leave the room, of course. And because the lawyer can use a non-recorded line that I don't have access to. And the lawyer calls me back in and starts telling me this sort of half story about an ad and he responded to, and he didn't think it was real. And I'm like, huh? But I'm confused. I'm very confused. And all I get from this conversation is it's not totally a mistake. And yet there's something I don't have all the pieces. I'm not able to comprehend anything that the guy is telling me. So I leave and his bond hearing is like the next day or the day after, and we go to the bond hearing. And in the bond hearing is when I learn that there was a sting operation, and the court is like flooded with federal agents and all kinds of people. And it was a sting operation, and there's multiple defendants, and we still don't even really have the details of what exactly happened, only that there's multiple people with this charge, and the feds are involved. And we're all freaking out. And all of the defendants go up, and the lawyer and the bondsman had told me that they usually reduce bond at that hearing to $100,000 most of the time, and so it's worth waiting a couple days if you do intend to bail them out. Well, in my husband's case, not only did they not reduce the bond, but they said they were going to increase his charge to not attempted human trafficking, but human trafficking. They thought they could hold him on more. And I'm like, what? Like, and he can't have contact with kids, he can't, like, all these things, and I'm just totally panicked. And we did have access to some investment money. He had stock in the company that he worked for, and so I was able to get access to the money to bail him out, because I still got to figure out what the hell's going on. And I go bail him out, and it was at that moment that he tells me that he has been soliciting his entire adult life, our entire marriage. And he swears up and down it was only adults, and that when they offered children, he didn't think it was real, and he was trying to figure out how to report it. That's his story. And so he's hit me with this whole, I've been cheating on you for years. You had no idea. And he's very flippant about it. Like, this has been happening since forever. This is not a big deal. Huh? Yeah. So this is all happening within a matter of days. So I'm in a total state of shock. I don't have an emotional response to him. I don't even know what, and he's being charged with something that, could put him away for a really, really long time, when he's saying, I didn't do anything that bad. And so I'm really, really confused and have no idea how to respond.
Just so I can
And
just so I can let my listeners understand, and myself, because some people might be confused even what he was charged for.
yes,
So human trafficking, can we define what that is?
yes. So, and the actual charge of human trafficking is buying or selling humans, essentially, and participating in the purchasing of humans for sexual purposes, especially minors, constitutes human trafficking. And so
Okay.
it's not just solicitation. It's because they're minors, because they cannot consent, it is purchasing them.
Okay. Okay. So it's purchasing other humans
Yes.
and selling them for value, for
Whether you're
money.
on the either side, it doesn't
Okay.
matter which side you're on. It's not just the sellers, it's not just the people moving them, it's not any, like, it's more than that. Even the people purchasing them, you can't take ownership of a human and a minor without being charged with human trafficking.
Okay. So I'm sure a lot of people even listening in are may even be surprised that this even exists or happens, right? So,
Yep.
it's so just to, to be to show some compassion in regards to that type of situation, because I'm also a little bit floored. I had a little bit of an idea what it was around, but okay, so just so we can recap what's happened so far. Your husband goes missing one evening. He never shows up. You sleep through the evening. You find out he's in jail. He has been put up for attempted human trafficking. Then
Mhm.
his charges go to
But they claim that's their next step, so they don't want to reduce the bond. Like,
right,
that's the
right.
prosecution's argument for not reducing the bond. They still have all their legal review things to do, but that's the message they're portraying.
So what happens in regards to, I'm going to get back to your story a little bit. What happens in this situation where your husband comes out on bail or on a bond? Sorry, I think I'm saying that right. I'm not as familiar with
You
the
bail him out, but what you bail him out with is the bond. It's
okay. So he gets out and he tells you this. He tells
yeah,
you that this is his truth of what's happening.
yes.
And what goes on at that point as the wife of this person? How long were you with him in your life?
So we were married for 6 years. We had an almost 6-year-old at that point.
Hmm.
Um, we'd been together for 9.
Okay.
So, I
So you knew him close to 10 years and
I knew him close to 10 years. Yeah. So you think you know somebody, right? Like
right. Right. So you think you know him, he comes out, he tells you this information, and what goes on in your mind at that point? Do you
I I totally was completely susceptible to his stance of I'm the victim. I didn't, it's not that bad. They're trying to pin this horrible thing on me. That's not true. And I just shove away all my feelings about this whole concept of being cheated on essentially and focus on the task at hand because my children's father is now in huge danger of massive things. And in my head, we'll deal with the other stuff later. We have to deal with this. And if he's not guilty, then we have to focus here.
right?
And I'll deal with the rest of it later. Like that, I'm compartmentalizing hardcore.
Okay. Okay. So I was just sorry to jump out of your story of what you were saying,
So
but
okay.
I wanted to know what you were feeling or reflecting at the time when that happened, because I'm sure if someone were to deal with that, it would be a difficult uh thing to deal with. You'd almost not know who you're talking to, or you'd probably be lost for words, I'm assuming. So what
100%.
yeah. So what happened after that? What happened next?
So he has to obviously like stay with his mom and all the things. And, I have no idea how these legal processes work. I have no idea how criminal trials work. I've watched a lot of SVU, but they make it sound like it goes really fast. It's a really slow process.
Mm.
And, we get lawyers involved, we get all kinds of other pieces involved, but we realize that, there's like status hearings that are 10 minutes. Like there's a lot of process that goes through. He ends up having an evaluation done to evaluate, the risk assessments or whatever. And it was that evaluation that got back that I learned that he was not only soliciting men or women, but men as well, which was news to me. So there was new information coming out that he was continuing to keep from me. And the reality is, I have boys. And so I first thought there was no danger for them, even if anything was somewhat real, because I had boys. And then I learned that there was men as well. But I refuse to look at any of it. I just task at hand. We have to focus. We have to get, and then he gets offered a plea deal, which surprised me, but he got offered a plea deal. And because I think he's going to fight it, he tells me that he tried to look up how to report it and he had an email crafted to Homeland Security. Like he tells me this story that he's got all of this evidence to show that his intent wasn't to go through with this because the papers had come out with all of this detail about an 11 and 14-year-old that were offered and that the men showed up with money and all of the things, and that's when they were caught. And so he gets offered a plea deal, and the plea deal is only probation, not even jail time. His lawyers were even surprised. And in the state of Colorado, there is a precedent that says a sex offender does not automatically lose their right to parent. And so a plea deal, he can even move back into the house and have unrestricted access to the
I'm
children.
sorry, can you repeat
Yes.
what you said about Colorado? You cut out there.
In the state of Colorado,
Mhm.
there is a Supreme Court precedent that says a sex offender does not automatically lose their right to parent. And therefore, they have their constitutional parental rights intact, even with a sex offense, unless the child is their victim, essentially.
Okay.
And so by taking the plea deal, he would also be able to move back into the house and have unrestricted access to his own children. He would still be on probation and not allowed around other children. As a sex offender on probation, their probation is very different. But he could move home and he would have to plead guilty to a lesser charge, and that would be it. And so he's like, of course I'm going to take it. And I was like, I thought you were not guilty. I thought we were going to fight this. And his lawyers said, don't do that. Like, they will get you. And I'm like, what do you mean? But I don't, the thing that people don't realize is the family doesn't have access to any of the information. Like I don't get the evidence that everybody else gets. You know, nobody like they're waiting for trial. The police report is not something I have access to. I don't have that information. And so all I have is what he says and what comes through him, and my determination that to believe and truly stay in denial of the situation. I also, because of my own parents' divorce, I lost access to my dad, and I had huge wounding around that, and wanting to keep my kids' father in their lives. That felt really, really important.
Right.
And I had this belief that if they were okay, I would be okay. And for them to be okay, they needed both parents. Like that was my belief. I had all of this wrapped up in all of it.
Of course.
And so I stayed, and he pled guilty to a lesser charge, and he moved back home. And I thought, okay, well, we'll try to, we can repair people recover from infidelity all the time, right? Like this is the story I'm trying to tell myself. People, there's a sex addiction. We've got to deal with that, but this is fixable. We have 3 children, like we'll deal with all of that stuff. I refused I refused to do anything but insist that this is what we were going to do. And his mental health started to deteriorate, and I realized pretty quickly that I was going to actually have to go back to work, because he, as a now felon, he wasn't going to be able to have the type of job he did before. And I started looking for work, and I tried really, really hard to stay in this bubble I had created of just my little family, and we were safe if we stayed together, and it was mom and dad and the kids, and everybody else, you know, we're not looking at them because of all of the judgments and everything else going on. And I did finally find a job, and I went back to work it was about a year now after his arrest. And the moment I started going back to work, I had to like leave the bubble that I had created. I had to separate myself from this situation, because it had gotten to the point where even if we weren't together, we were on the phone 24/7. I didn't have a thought without him in my head. If I started to have feelings, he would make me feel guilty for the feelings. And I just, like, I couldn't do anything without him right there. And so by going back to work, I'd started to shift it. And I started to, first of all, I didn't want anybody at work to know the life I was living. And I started to realize that my 2 worlds could not intersect. I had like a full-blown panic attack thinking about the company Christmas party, because you're expected to bring your spouse. And people knew I was married, but I didn't want him to come, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And I had this like full-blown, I can't. And I started to realize that if my 2 worlds couldn't collide, then which one was the problem? And work had become a safe place and eventually, and I was doing well there, and I was making friends there. And I started to realize that it was my marriage that was the problem. And I started to have visions of all of the people that he was with. Like if he tried to initiate with me, I would see all of this, like it was like ghosts. And oh, that's how you looked at them, that's what you wanted to do with them. Like those were they started repeating in my head like that. And I just started pushing and pushing. I couldn't. And at the same time, I had just fought to keep my family together. And I started drinking. I literally had half a bottle of wine before I could even look at my husband. It got to that point.
Wow.
And I was still trying to keep my family together. I was still trying to pretend I was okay. And eventually I found myself becoming attracted to a coworker. And obviously this marriage isn't okay, and work is safe, and they're giving me attention. And I found myself wanting to leave my marriage, and I was having a really hard time with myself, because I was trying to keep my family together, and yet I couldn't look at him. And it escalated, and I realized I know what it's like to be cheated on. I'm not going to do that. So I told him how I felt, and that I was going to pursue other things, and I was going to be honest about it, and I was going to say how I feel, and I'm not going to do it in secret. And at first he tried to talk me out of it. And then he said, I did my thing, you go do yours. But let's keep the family together. Let's all just move into a different room. We'll continue to parent the kids together, pulling at all of we don't want to separate the kids. We don't want to move households and all of that. And okay. And I started dating, And that was a really nice thing and good thing for me because I learned how to have fun again. I remembered who I was again outside of just mom and wife and duty and obligation and all of the things that I had been wound up in for the last 6, 7 years. I started to realize that I could be with somebody who didn't have ghosts and didn't have these deviances and demons and all of these things. And yet I was still really conflicted because I was living with my spouse and I was dating a coworker. It was pretty messy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Truthfully. It was very confusing for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, and then I got promoted at work and I was now going to be my boyfriend's boss. So that was a no-no.
Mm.
And so I made the decision to break it off because I was like, I gotta figure out my house. I gotta figure out my household. I don't know what's going on. I don't want to be with him, but this isn't okay. And so I broke it off, and my husband thinks we're getting back together. Nope, nope, not doing that, because I'm also starting to see more of the manipulative behaviors come out now that I'm from the outside. And I'm starting to see my children's behavior change towards me. And I'm starting to see that they are blaming me for the disconnection. And my 3-year-old even says, like, are you going to leave and have a baby with somebody else and not come back? 3-year-olds don't come up with that stuff.
Wow.
Like the
Yeah.
stories that were coming through them were showing me how actually manipulative he was in a way I couldn't see before.
Mhm.
But I still don't think he's dangerous. I just think he's an asshole, truthfully. And the next thing I know, he hands me divorce papers and tries to remove me from the home and claim that he's the primary parent.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. I'm livid, like beyond seeing red, livid with him. And we go to a temporary orders hearing where he tries to make his case and I try to make my case. And eventually he does get ordered to move out of the house. But the custody arrangement ends up being a really weird 50-50 arrangement because even though I'm trying to say he shouldn't have overnights, he has this offense, I don't know what's going on. I could not prove enough that they were in danger, and all of his probation officer and his therapist were saying he was low risk. So it's not the end, it's just the next step. And, the next step's a mediation. He tries to take more than half of our investment monies, he just every little step. And the manipulations only get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the kids start saying, you left us, and daddy says this, and daddy says that. And, I get a parental rights evaluator involved. So it's a third party that you hire to come make an evaluation and a recommendation to the court. They do full psych evals. He has multiple personality disorders. I'm thankfully normal, which was nice validation at that time. There was some conversation about the whole dating was pretty confusing for the kids, and you should probably think about that more, but it was fair enough, truthfully. And yet, because of the court statutes, 50-50 is still the default. And so her first recommendation was 50-50 with some allowances for his restrictions and some of the other things. But essentially, despite the huge amount of parental alienation that was being proven, which, if people don't know, is when one parent tries to pit the other parent against the kids and make them the bad guy, which is really, really harmful for the child-parent relationship in that case. And that's what he was trying to install in the kids against me.
Mm.
And even with that, she was basically saying, we just need more therapy and things of that sort to mitigate. And I didn't like that recommendation, and yet I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to put any of this together. I didn't want to be in this situation. So we tried to settle. And he ignores the settlement completely because there was one part of the settlement where she said I should have slightly more decision making in mental health and extracurricular in school because I was the one who was going to have to deal with those things and he was the one with mental health issues.
Right.
He could not handle that it was not 50-50 at all. And even though this was like this much, he couldn't. So he ignored the settlement. He refused to sign it, refused to even respond to his lawyer. And during that period of time where we waited for the settlement, the bottom dropped out of my world again. And this time, it was far worse than everything that had come before it. I'm taking my children to school. I'm prepping for a work presentation in my head, ignoring them and their chatter. I pull into the school, and as my middle child gets out, he looks at me and he says, sometimes I suck on daddy's fingers. And my heart drops and I can't say anything. I can't do anything. I just have to let him go to school. And I call my lawyers. I
How
call,
old was your son at that point?
he was, I believe he was 7.
And he just turns and says that to you as he's getting out to go to
Yeah.
class. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had started to see the manipulations turning into grooming like behaviors, but I didn't quite see all of that yet. And that my middle child had started to be somewhat even inappropriate with me and his affections. But again, I was really trying not to put those together. And then when he said that, it just, and of course, memories. This is the man who was arrested for trying to have sex with 11 to 14-year-olds. Like, hello, it's been in front of your face the whole time. But now what do? I'm in the middle of a high conflict divorce. Making new accusations is very dangerous because then you can be accused of parental alienation. And I have to proceed very carefully. And I call the lawyers. I call my, my kids are all in therapy. I call the therapist. She says to me, ask him to show you what he means. And so, I waited a little while just to not try to make a big deal out of it because you don't really want to have him in his mind think this is a big deal either.
Right.
And I asked him to show me, and it's exactly what you might imagine. And I called the therapist back, and she said if he had done that in front of me, I would have to call Child Protective Services. And that was enough for my lawyers to say, you can call Child Protective Services.
Okay.
So I call them, make the report, and then you wait. It's like the most maddening thing ever. You wait. And they call me back a couple of days later, and I'm still having to hand my kids over during this time. Like there's literally nothing. I would be charged with kidnapping if I didn't.
Are you married at this time or divorced?
No, we're still married. We're in the middle of the divorce
Yeah,
process.
it takes a
So
long time, right? Yeah.
it
Sometimes it
takes,
takes
it's what
5 years for some people. It's like it takes a long time.
thankfully, it was only 18 months, not 5 years, but it was a very long 18 months.
Right.
And so the CPS caseworker calls, says he wants to interview my son. Great. He wants to come to the house. Okay, whatever. He shows up, he introduces himself, and he point blank looks at my 7-year-old child and says, "Oh, your mom told me about this game you played with your dad. Is that true?" And my kid is terrified of this man. He's literally hiding under the kitchen table and doesn't even know how to answer, "Oh, we don't do that anymore." And then I'm trying to talk to the guy, and I was like, this is not how you interview children. Like, who the hell are you? And the guy says, "Okay, we'll go interview dad. I'll get back to you." What?
Wow.
What? And then he went and talked to my ex, and probation apparently polygraphed him because that's what they do on sex offender probation, and cleared him. And they said, "Oh, it's good, case closed." And I'm sitting here going, what the ever loving is going on? And this is my rock bottom. Like fully, I'm going to end up with kids who are going to be abused or who knows what else. Like, and I don't even know what to do to stop it. And at this point, I'm in therapy as well. I've been diagnosed with PTSD. I have major anxiety every time there's an interaction. Every interaction is high conflict. Like there's just, I'm not okay. And I was in my therapist's office actually. And she's even like, I don't think this is crazy. This is not, I don't know what to tell you because this is not how the system's supposed to work. And then as I'm leaving, she says, "Have you ever considered seeing a psychic?" What? Like a fortune teller? Like, what are you talking about? And she's like a regular, mental health professional.
Yeah.
And I've been completely agnostic most of my life. My mom was fairly spiritual, but like, what? And I was like, are you saying there's the real ones? Like, do you know one? What are you talking about? And she's like, "I know a good one." Okay. Like, I'll try anything, right? I'll go to your lady, whatever. Because at this point, I don't know what else to do. And so I go to see the psychic and I walk in and, it's crystals and deities and all things. And you got to take your shoes off. And she goes on about, electronics don't work around her. And she sees angels like they're people. And I'm just like, okay, I don't really know why I'm here, but
yeah.
I'm here. And she starts telling me this story. And she starts telling me this story about this past life of mine, 500 some years ago. And I was married to the same man, and he was physically abusive, and the energy of the abuse was the same. It just this time it was physical versus the mental.
Mm.
And the, things were kind of okay, well enough until the kids came. And she starts like telling my life story in a way that didn't make sense. Like she starts repeating the things that have been playing in my head about I have to, I have to stay for the kids. I have to do this for the kids. I have to, if I do this, then he'll be okay. And I'm just like this eerie moment in my mind. I'm like, okay, I'm listening, lady. Like I'm listening. And then she says, in that life, he basically beat me to death and he threw me down the stairs. And my body has this like full on shiver, holy crap moment. And she says, you're still afraid of him now today because of that. And you have to get a hold of that fear. Because she was right. I was terrified of him. He never hit me. He was stalking me. He was very mentally and manipulative and completely passive aggressive. But he wasn't physically abusive. And she's like, you have to get a hold of that fear because it's not even happening right now. And then she says, the reason you're sitting down in this chair right now, the reason your angels created this appointment for you was because you need to make a choice. I said, what do you mean? I have chosen. Like I've done all the things. And she says, no, you haven't. You have to choose to be done with him in every single life, in every situation. And it was in that moment that I saw myself clearly, because the truth is I didn't want any of it. I didn't want to be in this situation. I wanted my family back. I wanted to believe that all of this had another explanation still.
Yeah.
I still wanted my marriage on some level.
Mm.
And because I was still holding that, I hadn't 100% chosen. And I saw myself in that moment and all of the energy and all of the disparate places. And I stood up in my chair and I said, I'm done. And she says, okay, I can help you now. Like, okay. And she says, there are more people who can help. Like everybody knows somebody. Keep asking, share your story, ask for help, and follow all of the threads. She believed he had pornography still. And if I could let that lid open, he would get, that would be a probation violation and who knows what else. She had a lot of just kind of recommendations for different avenues to go. And she basically said, you just have to keep going. Like everybody wants to help you. You just have to keep going. And I left her office with this, okay, I can do this. I don't know what I have to do, but I can do this. And I had 6 weeks until the final divorce hearing at that point. We had asked the evaluator to do another report. She gave him some new diagnoses, another set of personality disorders, and all of the things that had happened. And when I got back to work, it was actually a coworker of mine said, I've been kind of hearing a little bit about what's going on. I know somebody who works for ICE. I'm going to call him. It's like, okay. She calls him. They put me in touch with Homeland Security. They put me in touch with the arresting officer that put the cuffs on him in 2016. They get me in touch with the local police department. They are going to do everything they can to try to help me. They reopen the CPS report and and actually forensically interview my child. Too much time had passed, but he was very clear. Like just because he didn't disclose anything doesn't mean anything didn't happen. It just means nothing was disclosed. And then I basically, everybody who popped in my mind, I called and I said, who do you know? Or how can you help? And I would follow every single lead. Anybody they knew, I would call. Anybody they knew, I would call. I just expanded my network of support. And one person recommended I call the district attorney. I was like, I don't know how they can help. And the district attorney said, I can unseal the case file for you. I said, you can? And he said, yeah, I have to redact a couple of things and then I can make it's now public record. We have to remove identifiable information. And I said, if you're willing to do that, I have not seen it. And he unsealed the case file for me. And I got to actually read the police report of what happened in 2016 for the first time now, a month before my divorce.
Wow.
And I got to read the transcript of the conversation between him and the undercover agent. And if there was any last doubt in my mind, it was gone because I was with the man. I knew his, intimate desires. I knew his fetishes in a sense. And it was very clear, his intention. And it was very clear this wasn't the first time.
Mm.
And so, again, I'm still having to pass my kids around. I'm reading them books about keeping private parts private. I'm trying to help. My kid starts disclosing more information. He starts talking about my, his father coming into his bed in the middle of the night. He starts talking about, and I start recording every conversation. I start just, instead of being frustrated with them for their behavior and all of the crazy, I start realizing they're experiencing trauma too. They just don't understand it. And so I started really trying to support in a different way, gathering evidence. We tried to file a motion to restrict parenting time completely, even before the divorce. And we thought it worked, and then it didn't work. And I said, okay, I need more evidence. I don't know what it is, but there's a reason that this isn't working yet. I still have to collect more information. And so I really shifted this belief that it had to work out, and I could create safety and security for me and my kids, and I could focus on the judge seeing clearly, and me not being seen as alienating, but protecting. And we showed up at court. This was February of 2020, unknowing what was coming in the future. And we went to court and had really the performance of our lives in a lot of ways. My lawyer kicked ass, and he really, really drove into the incompetence of the probation officer and the therapist. And we had multiple evaluations. We had all of the, mental health disorders. We had all of the grooming behavior, and we were really able to make our case that with these set of mental health disorders, with these pasts, with these behaviors, could he be sexually grooming the kids? Like, we were able to build that case. And then I took the stand, and everything that couldn't come through there came through me, and why I was saying the things I was saying. And I showed the judge exactly what my son showed me. And we really got to state our case. And then, you leave court and you wait. She did at that day order him to no longer sleep with the children. She was pretty appalled that that was happening. But other than that, she said, I'm not ready to fully rule on everything. So I'm gonna, I'll get back to you.
Mm.
A few days later, which happened to be literally the night before my 33rd birthday, I got the order, and my lawyer sent it over to me, and he calls me and says, read it over and call me back. And the order basically is that immediately all overnight is removed, and he is only awarded 2 afternoons a week. And he has 6 weeks to comply with a very large list of requirements, which includes more evaluations, therapists, getting a job, a bunch of other things. And then if he complies within 6 weeks, then he can have, I think it was like every other weekend, assuming he stays compliant with all of these other things in place. If he doesn't do anything by those 6 weeks, he only gets supervised visitation time going forward. So she gives him one more chance to get his stuff together, to get help, to get therapy, all the things. And regardless of that, I have full decision making entirely. And I'm relieved. My lawyer said I'm going to be still upset because it's not exactly what we asked for, but I'm relieved that there's protections, the overnights are gone, and it's a couple afternoons a week. And I also know, based on historic history, that he's not only unwilling, but incapable of any of the things that they asked for. And so it was really only a matter of time. And I was right. I mean, COVID hit 2 weeks later. Everybody came home. Thank God they were never quarantined with him. And 6 weeks came and went, and not a single thing was done. No order of compliance was submitted. And about a week later was the last phone call he ever made. And it has now been almost 4 years since we've had any contact with him.
Wow.
And that was it. Like, it was over. And he literally has vanished, in a sense. I have not heard, I have not received a dime. I don't care. He's
Right.
gone.
Wow. Wow. That is something out of a movie.
I'm pretty sure it will be a movie one day.
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something out of a movie. It's, I'm taking it all in. So I'm a singer-songwriter, musician, all these things. I do all these things. I've been doing them my whole life. But one of the areas of work I was going to work in was social work, And I was going through my education to be a child and youth worker and work with troubled kids, I was friends with a lot of kids in high school that had a lot of life experiences. And when I started teaching music, I actually started teaching in juvenile delinquent homes and working with kids that went down a bad path. And everyone always has these, mindsets of what these kids, they're just bad kids.
Mhm.
But when you get to know why,
Yeah.
that's a whole other thing. And I eventually left the social work world because it was just I'm too sensitive of a human. It takes a certain person to be able to do it, and
Yes,
I got to a point where I realized I'm not gonna probably be on this earth very long if I do this because it's so hard energetically to work in
it
that
is.
kind of stuff. So even hearing the story, as a man, it makes me and pretty angry, not gonna lie. Um, to hear that. But again, I don't understand it. I don't understand when someone's got mental illness in that way. I don't understand it, and I don't want to judge too much. But just your experience, what you've went through, um, that's pretty remarkable that you've gotten through it, and I can see why you're at a point now where you want to have your voice heard so that people can not feel alone if they're dealing with maybe not something as quite that's quite an experience to go through. I don't think that the average person would go through that in life, luckily. Well, thanks for sharing your story. That's pretty remarkable. I can see
That's
I can see why it's turned into a book. What is the book called?
the book's title is The Sex Trafficker's Wife.
The Sex Trafficker's Wife. I think
Yes.
I read that and I immediately could have seen that being about 10 different topics.
Yep.
It could mean so many different things, but um I know that world exists. I've spoke with other people again being in social work and uh you know it's terrible that it goes on. Um I don't know what it would be like to have been married to someone that you thought you knew very well. And that that is incredible. I yeah, I'm sure you get this reaction when people hear your
I
story.
do. It's really the speechless reaction. And
It
I
is.
have been on many interviews at this point, and my goal is to help others feel less alone. And there are people who have been married to people who've done horrendous things and had no idea.
Right.
There's also people who are in abusive relationships and don't know how to get out. And there's people who've had versions of manipulation and parental alienation. There's people who are sharing custody with their abuser and their children's abuser. Like there's so many versions of it. And my original goal was simply really to help people feel less alone and to let them know they too have a choice. And they have a choice in how they respond to the challenges. And even if it seems like they don't, there's always more, because it certainly seemed like I didn't have a choice for a long time too.
Besides appearing on other podcasts like myself, how else are you being heard? How else can people
So
hear you?
I'm about to give a TEDx talk here in almost a week, which
Wow.
is very exciting. Um, I
Whereabouts is
have
the TED?
my
Where's the TEDx,
what?
or is this online, or whereabouts is
It's a
that?
TEDx. It's actually going to be at Western U in London, Ontario. So I'm delivering a talk where I'm going to share my story as my, to prove my point of what I'm sharing. It's called The Healing Power of Storytelling. And that'll be here. It literally is on the 2nd of January. So, or 2nd of February, I mean.
Okay.
That will be, and it will be posted, I'm sure, on the TEDx page once they get it all uploaded.
Right.
I have my own podcast. And I also have started my own foundation that I'm trying to get off the ground to help people who are fighting for custody from their abusers and their children's abusers. Because there's a lot of support for homelessness, there's a lot of support for food insecurity. There's nobody helping you with the legal fight when there's mental, emotional, physical, sexual, financial abuse going on.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
And my goal in the end is to create a trauma-informed legal system that is aware of, first of all, like you said, the reason that kids are the way they are, they're going through massive amounts of trauma and they're responding to it. And without a trauma-informed legal system, we're going to continue the cycle of the victims becoming the abusers over and over and over again. And I can see it for what it is from a trauma lens now. And I can see that it's not working, what we're doing also. And I want to support and advocate in every way I can. I want to use my story to create big change in legal systems, in all of this stuff, because it's just not okay.
Right.
And I believe we all have the right to choose, but we have to know that we actually can choose. And a lot of people don't. We're so ingrained in what society says is right and how you're supposed to behave. And you get sucked into this belief system and you really feel like this is the only choice I have. And it's just not the case.
Yeah. So it sounds, I mean, that's clearly why you're an advocate for change, because you're
That
looking
is
to,
exactly why.
that's why. Yeah. Because you're trying to bring, and it's great that you're doing that because, your experience is very, um, it's very different. It's very different. It's not something that happens as common as physical and mental abuse, actually.
Correct.
I would believe that physical, mental abuse, narcissistic behavior, those types of things that, um, um, can cause like mental abuse is so wide. There's marriages where you don't know
Correct.
you're going through
And I
that,
didn't know. I didn't know I was being manipulated either.
Right.
Like looking
Yeah.
back, of course I can see it, but I had no idea.
Yeah. You said that you had a podcast. What's the podcast that you run
It's
called?
called The Amanda Quick Show.
Oh, the Amanda Quick Show. It's
The
just
Amanda Quick Show. It's
perfect.
a combination of talking about my story, talking about the advocacy, talking about spiritual topics because I got my eyes got opened. There's more out there.
Oh yeah.
I believe in energy in a different way. I believe in the power of our consciousness in a different way. It really kicked off a spiritual awakening in me to be able to help people on more than just this therapeutic level. And I can see the connection from the physical, emotion, and mental and spiritual connections that trauma has and why people have the illnesses they have after the traumas they have. And all of those
100%.
connections are there. And so I talk, really, it's basically my whatever I want to talk about platform, to be
Yeah.
honest. Um, and my goal is to, start to bring people and lift up their stories. But I've really focused on the people who can be transparent and vulnerable in their ways and can see the lessons for what they were and really bring people along on that journey and be that bridge between where you were and where you can be.
Right. Well, that's great. I mean, it's great that you started a podcast and you're doing what you're doing.
Yep.
Again, hopefully people will hear your story and get the courage to make the changes they want. In regards to spirituality, I mean, my show is um really been around near-death experiences,
Hmm.
people's life journeys, things like that. And it seems to be going in that direction even more. A story like this is a little bit offshoot from um, my regular type of show, but that's great because it again, every episode that you make in a podcast can reach a different person in a different way. And if it speaks to them and
Yeah.
gives them some kind of encouragement, right? So as soon as you start talking about the psychic situation, I'm like, yeah, that's my people.
Pleasure people. Yeah, no,
That's my style.
it kicked off this knowing in me in a very different way. And I went down a whole rabbit hole of learning quantum healing and connecting to all kinds of different things and just trying to understand this experience in a different
Oh,
way because I needed to know why I went through this and what I'm supposed to do with this experience. And I've really understood now that a lot of it was about understanding compassionately what people go through and really understanding how much I am the creator of my reality from a full-on energetic structural level.
mm,
Everything that I have done is to create the experience that I can then use. And did I know consciously? Of course not. But now today I get it from a different lens and I can speak to people on the really physical level, and I can speak to people on the really woo-woo level, because I go
Yep.
the full spectrum.
Well, in an odd sense, without actually having to make an exit, you kind of had an NDE. I mean,
I did.
your life as you knew it was shattered, and
Yes.
you had to somehow pick up the pieces. So I can't imagine. I mean, a lot of people go through that through regular separations and divorce, but yours was like that on fire. I mean, you were going through, you weren't just high school
Yeah.
sweethearts depending to be,
No.
deciding to be, try a different lifestyle. But like it was like that was a lot to go through. And hopefully, I'm glad that you're on the other side of it and that I again speechless is the right word for probably most people because you can only say so much. I mean,
I know.
it's good that the outcome happened the way it did and everything. So,
Yeah.
um, one question I ask before I end all my episodes, and this is, it still relates to what you went through, right? But having the life experience you've had, having the experience in general that you've had, if I were to now ask you why we are here
Mhm.
as a human being, like why do we come here? Why do you what is the first thing that comes to you with all the experience that you've gone through and we had to overcome?
So I believe the purpose of life is to create experiences. And if you're lucky, those experiences will also be able to change you.
Oh wow, I love that. That is a simplified one or two sentence explanation. Sometimes people talk for about 5 minutes about why we're here, or they'll just say, they'll just say to love, and that's great too. But I like that to create your
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. And
Wow.
it's your choice how you want to create your experience. And I
Yeah.
truly believe that we have that power. And I have proven this now to myself in multiple different ways, even before I understood what I was doing.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing again. Thanks for sharing. I usually say to all my listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe. As usual, we're trying to bring our voices out to other people that need to hear it and would love to hear it. And so, again, thank you so much, Amanda, for being on the show today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you coming on. And until next time, we'll see you next time on the Soul Inspired. So